G'day YouTube, Warble's on a lot here. Time to go and play in the traffic again. If we have a look at the topographic map, last video I made on the bike, started there at the hut, went down to the Brilda driveway, along the Brilda driveway, and then we went along here, and then we jumped maps and went across the railway line and got as far as that driveway there. And that worked out to be 8.2 kilometres return. As you can see, contour lines are 10 metres apart, which with my phone doesn't really help much. So why don't we have a look at a vertical transect? With the hut at 1,111 metres, and the green line being my grass driveway, and the yellow line being the Brilda driveway, and the orange line to 4 kilometres to the railway line being the Yarraford Road. So there to there is 4.2 kilometres. And as you can see, it was more or less downhill all the way, 80 metres downhill, 80 metres back up, roughly. Which took 157.8 watt hours out of the deep cycle lead acid storage batteries over a bit over 2 hours to recharge. And then if you subtract the 6.5 watts which it takes to run the inverter, and then subtract 5% for the inefficiency of the battery charger, we come up with 134.6 watt hours to recharge battery number 1. And that's kind of a little bit perplexing, because by the time we got back with battery number 1, we'd gone from 5 bars of battery available to 1 bar of battery available. 134 watt hours out of a 350 watt hour battery. And according to the indicator on the computer screen, yeah, that was 4/5 of the battery's available power. So either the LED screen readout has got the same problem as the electric fridge I showed you in the previous video, where it displays a spurious battery charge reading, in which case the batteries will provide a lot longer on the last indicated 1/5 or 20% than they do for the first 4/5. They're 41.8 volts when they come off the charger. They're usually 41.7 volts when they go into service. Yesterday I took a run to the highway and back. Battery number 2 was still showing 2 bars of battery available, so it had only used 60%, not 80%, according to its calculation. It was reading 38.3 volts as I arrived back at the hut. Battery number 1, I think it was 38.2, or maybe it was 38.2. So there was only 0.1 of a volt in it as to whether it was showing 1 bar or 2 bars. It really won't be until I go something further than 8 kilometres that I find out how far one battery actually goes. So far I've only been doing 7-8 kilometres at a time, and I'm planning on building my way up from that. But yeah, battery number 1 being fed by 2 golf cart batteries, it pulled around about 8.2 amps maximum, and it took from 3 in the afternoon to 5:45 at night to finish charging it. The lights, yeah, they didn't take long at all, less than an hour to recharge the lights, maybe half an amp hour all up. Battery 2, 7.9 kilometres instead of 8.2, so 300 yards extra distance, and it started charging at 5 to 5 and finished at 7 minutes past 6. 157 watt hours total pulled out of the battery, which worked out to 134.4 watt hours after deducting points for inverter inefficiency and battery charger inefficiency. So for approximately the same distance, both the batteries took approximately the same amount of power out of the deep cycle storage batteries. And the alternative journey is from here at the hut down to the Barilda driveway, along the Barilda driveway, down Yarraford Road, back along Yarraford Road, and yeah, that's 7.9 kilometres. I don't have, or do I? Yeah, I do have a vertical transect on the same scale. This is the vertical transect of the intended trip to town, with Glen Innes being along here, and I have to go up along here to get to my mother's place because she lives just as high as I do. So 1,103 metres, I suppose, at the hut. The green is my driveway, the yellow is the Barilda driveway, the orange is Yarraford Road to the highway. So yeah, there's more vertical development because you've got 5, 15, 25, 35, 45 metres that you've got to climb there. Then what's this? 1,035 to, yeah, that's 70 or 80 metres there. So it's a hillier trip going to the highway and back. But considering that I want to go in here and go shopping and then visit the old girl and then come all the way back, it's going to be kind of critical that I can get more than 8 kilometres out of 80% of a battery. But before I go out and play in the traffic, I have got a dummy run lined up, which consists of going from my place to the highway, to the railway, and back to my place. And that looks like that on a transect. My place, to the highway, to the railway, to my place, and that comes out as 16 kilometres. So that's more or less the equivalent of going to the centre of Glen Innes and back. And after I've mastered riding that far, and maybe doing that twice in a day, that's when I will first attempt to go out and play in the traffic along here. If you'll forgive the lack of colour coding, we expand the horizontal scale by a factor of 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have the hut, the Barilda gate, the highway, oops, got that one wrong, should read the key. From the hut, the front gate, upside down tree, the washaway, the Barilda gate, the causeway, the highway, down to the causeway, back to the Barilda gate, and back up to the hut. So that's the this effort plotting it out on the map using dividers. I came out to 7 kilometres, but the push bike says that it's 7.9. How do I know? My divider's on the 1 in 25,000 topographic map, or the computer that counts how many times the tyres go around. That's a graph of charging rates in how many watts versus time, and up here we have watt hours in terms of how much power is going into the battery. But it wasn't a particularly scientific test because I did 4 different trips doing totally different kinds of riding. But that was 4 trips to the highway and back to the hut. So I decided to get a little bit serious and only measure from the front gate, actually, sorry, below that, from the upside down tree to the front gate and back. So what you've basically got is 1.2 kilometres. And downhill is in green, uphill is in orange, and I'm pretty much stopping there, except on the very last trip when I rode it as far up the hill as I could and then walked it. So battery number 1, average speed 15.7 kilometres per hour, max speed 20.3. Battery 2, average 14.8 kilometres per hour, maximum 20.7. Battery 3, average 16 kilometres per hour, maximum 22.2. Battery 4, average 17.2 kilometres per hour, maximum 22.6. So guess which little smart ass starts to go faster when he gets a little bit better at doing it after practice, because practice is cheating. But yeah, that was going the downhill. Uphill in turbo mode. Battery number 1, 15.5 kilometres per hour average speed, 24.4 kilometres per hour max going up the hill. Duty cycle 43.6 watt hours, and it took 60.48 out of the deep cycle storage battery to put the 43 into the bike battery. Battery 2, 20.6 kilometre per hour average, 28.2 kilometre per hour maximum, duty cycle 41.08. So it used less power, and I went faster from 57 watt hours out of the deep cycles. Battery 3, 21.6 kilometres per hour average, 27.2 kilometres per hour maximum, duty cycle 41.7 from 57.11. Battery 4, when I went all the way back up to the hut, we had 20.7 kilometres per hour average, 25.8 kilometres per hour maximum, duty cycle 48.9 watt hours from 67 watt hours. So there's not a lot of difference in the battery, but batteries 2, 3 and 4 are slightly better than battery number 1, and that's probably because when I bought the bike, I thought they had top-up charged the battery before I went down and collected the bike. So I didn't do a top-up charge before I first rode it. So I think I might have damaged that first battery just a bit by silliness. Anyway, fastest uphill run, 3 minutes to go up 71 feet with a weight of 210 pounds equals 0.381 of 550 pounds, which is how much you need to calculate a horsepower. 0.381 times 77 in feet divided by 180 seconds equals 0.163 of a horsepower, which is 746 horsepower, 746 watts. So 0.163 of 746 is 121.8 watts worth of work just to lift the weight up that far in that time. So I'm just assuming that the mechanical work of lifting the weight equals the mechanical work of opposing the aerodynamic drag of cruising along at average speed of 20 kilometres per hour, hitting heights of 25, 27, 28, 24 kilometres per hour. And that's how I calculated or allocated that the motor is actually fair income, putting out something like 245 watts out of the alleged 250 that it's supposed to. So it's a very good little motor. And the plan for today's episode of Playing in the Traffic is to run from the hut to the highway and back to the hut with battery 3 in the bike. I wonder why it is that people think I'm an obsessive compulsive control freak. Why would that be? Battery 1, battery 2, battery 3, battery 4. All I'm doing is trying to know what I'm doing. When you think that there's $5,500 worth of push bike and accessories, with $1,000 worth of solar gear to charge the bloody thing, this fantasy has to date cost me exactly what it cost to buy that thing 7 years ago and register it and put it on the road. A $6,500 e-bike project. Got to plug it in. There we go. Now we have a screen. Can we read the screen? I can. 15.1 kilometres, so that's here to the railway and back, plus here to the highway and back. 51.8 kilometres. There we go, 51.8 kilometres. Put a bit of sun on the screen and that might work better. The simple fact of mathematics is that I'm going to have to do another 11 kilometres on this thing in order to bring the actual cost of it down to $100 per kilometre. Yeah? $6,500 for the electric bicycle fantasy. 66 kilometres is going to be when it's only $100 a kilometre. And then it comes down from there. And the more you ride it, the cheaper it gets. But there's a pretty big upfront expense because effectively you have to buy the bike, you have to buy the solar gear, you have to buy the spare batteries, and you've kind of paid up front for all the, quote, fuel you're ever going to use. And I bought a heap of consumables as well. I've got 2 spare tyres for the bike. I've got a trailer to go behind the bike. I've got 2 spare tyres for the trailer. I've got spare tubes. I've got 4 spare sets of brake blocks for the bike because going down my driveway and going down the Barilda driveway always means under brakes. And me on the push bike, we're talking 180 pounds. Those brake blocks and the disc brakes, they work pretty hard. And one of the last things I want is for the brake blocks to run out and there to be no import pathway for the Chinesium replacements. So I've got my replacements already on hand. 41.7. Yep, 41.7 volts before I start out. I pumped up the tyres from 20 psi to 60. What is it they say? If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And if I can't manage it, then I run the risk of mismanaging it. And if I mismanage it, then that's potentially $6,500 pissed away down the drain. So that stops them from rattling and getting in the way. And I don't want to mismanage it. I don't want to trash the bike. Therefore, I write shit down so I can think about it and know that I'm not making it up as I go along. Because as my father used to say, I'm not as silly as I look. Even though I can contrive to look a lot sillier than your average loudmouth, green, extremist, activist, mad scientist and fool on the hill. Don't think there's many who look quite as silly as me, but I'm not as silly as I look. This is protective coloration. Okay. I've just written down that I'm about to switch the thing on at 10:58. Right. I suppose I better tuck my bloody trouser leg into my sock. Although this thing has a chain guard, it would be kind of embarrassing to get stuck with my trouser leg caught in the chain of my e-bike. Ah yes, that's got much more round tyres on it than it had yesterday. They had flat spots on the bottom. Gonna have to get used to having that kickstand halfway between the pedals and the tail wheel axle. I'm sort of used to the kickstand being in front of the back wheel. When you remember it, this one works pretty well. And I hope the camera will work. Yesterday, I had a great ride. met up with my next door neighbour while he was shifting some of his sheep, and his sheep were accompanied by an alpaca whose name is Kerry. You have to know a bit about Australian politics to understand that one. Kerry Packer. He was a media tycoon, son of a media tycoon. His nickname was the Goanna. Can't fiddle with the straps while going down this hill. I will stop at the upside down tree and try and fix the angle of the dangle of the camera. There we go, see why it's called the upside down tree? Because it is, in fact, a tree that's upside down with a stone arrow hanging in it. You really would not believe how many city-bred visitors miss it and go all the way to my next door neighbours. So yeah, as you can see, you have to go down this thing under brakes. Otherwise you get going too fast and then you can't see the bumps. And if you go over them too fast at the wrong angle of the wrong dangle, they'll spit you right off. And in theory, when the weather dries out, this driveway is about to be upgraded. But it's due to start raining again tomorrow. And there's still water in the gutters. And as you can see, there's rising ground both sides of the driveway. I really don't understand what they were thinking 150 years ago when they put this driveway in, other than back then there would have been a layer of soft, fluffy, friable soil which people had been carefully maintaining for at least 40,000 years, because that's how long the locals had been living here. Whoops, we have a light that's trying to escape. They don't call these shakedown cruisers for nothing, do they? Am I getting trouble between? There we go. I suppose I should turn the bloody thing on actually while I'm here, because it won't do me any good carrying it and having it not switched on. Likewise, the back set of cat eyes. I have that one blinking. And the bottom one on solid. And that's solid with the strobe flash. Bright bloody sun, and it probably won't do any good at all, but don't quite like the angle of the dangle of that. After tightening it up, I've got to change the bloody thing. It's a very crowded little set of handlebars here. Why is that? Why is it that turning this It's just an audio effect. Yeah, they don't call these shakedown cruisers for nothing. Well, that'll bugger the average speed for the run anyway. Go out here on my own personal private wheel track and see if that's a bit smoother. It is too, you know. Might try to remember that when it's time to come back uphill. But yeah, rather than put my wheels in the wheel rut, which is the river that to my left, I've been coming out here and slowly widening the road using the weight. The weight of the forester in the soft water log ground to push a trench into the ground. It's a bit like putting a bloody diesel engine in a sailing boat. Having that diesel topsail there sure makes a bloody difference. Okay, that reminds me to get the mirror lined up. At the same time I'm trying to get this bloody camera to do what it's supposed to do. Okay, so my idea of riding for economy is to come up to about 25 k's, and if it'll sustain 25 k's on the level, I let it. At the moment, I'm rolling downhill, so it's only taken 1 or 2 bars. I think if that's, the computer won't let me have full throttle. But right beside that little 0, there's ascending and descending wedge-shaped bars. And they tell you how much power the computer is giving to the motor. And it's supposed to cut out at 26 k's. But still giving me 40% power at 31 k's. So isn't that a naughty little computer? And I need to tighten my bloody mirror mount because the shaking has got to it unless I put my thumb on it. And here we come to what is actually the steepest hill on the way to town. On the flat 28, 27, full power, drop down to 25, so now I can pedal. Whoops. Bit of bloody finger trouble there. Reach for the gear change and hit the brake instead. But anyway, 7th gear, full throttle, 25 k's, pedaling up the hill. Not too bad. Speed's dropping off. It'll come down to about bloody 15 or so before I get to the top. Sixth gear. 22 at full throttle. Fifth gear. Actually, I think I do have a set of Allen keys in the toolkit, so I'll have a play with that mirror instead of just going straight back. Right, so that's the actual highway. Okay, and I'll pause the camera. Okay, those little bits of housekeeping done. Mirror not being feathered in the slipstream by the wind. Oh, it is still a bit bloody on the loose side. So yeah, 60% power, 25 k's, more or less flat level, slightly going uphill. I figured out what was making the clack, clack, clack as I was pedalling too. There was a press stud on the strap that covers the zipper on my right shoe, or boot. It's a lot of hassle, that bloody mirror. But they're frickin' vital, because you can't look under your armpit in this thing. Now here we're going to get a bit of speed up because we're going down that bastard of a hill. The one that's not so much fun to come up. So I'm using no power and I'm accelerating through 37 k's. We'll get my head down just a little bit. 40, 41.9, 42.9, 43.9. 44, 44.6, 44.6, 44.6 kilometres an hour, almost 30 miles an hour on a push bike. Going downhill, not using any power. My preferred technique is to roll down the hills motor along the flats and pedal to help the push bike going up the hills. Lazy old man technique, I guess. So it's a kind of a systematic campaign to slowly get used to the push bike or the electric bike, whatever it is. It's not an actual electric motorcycle. They start at about $5,000. Whereas this was $2,200 for the bare bike with one battery. And you got to register them. Got to have a motorcycle license. They'll do 80 kilometres an hour for 1 hour. So I'd probably need, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of panels, batteries, inverter, and charge controller to run an actual actual electric push bike. Needs a bit of help to get it just up that little bit of a hill. Got to remember to stand in the pedal on your right foot and let the bike sort of teeter-totter around that ankle joint. Big bloody hole in the road there. Rivulets running down both sides. That's right, I was going to go up my own personal Forester smoothed road, wasn't I? And yes, it is working. Yeah, this is better than being over there on the main road. At this point anyway. That was a bit bloody hairy. And that was a bit muddy. I think I'll come out over here. It's rough, but I got a bit more wriggle room. And the mirror mount has failed again. Let it lay over. Never mind. I can fix that later on. I've already interrupted the video once to play with the mirror. That should be enough. Definitely bumpier with more air in the tyres, but less rolling resistance. Less rolling resistance is better. That's the 10. Yeah. 2 bars of battery. 6.3. Yeah. Clearly I should have tightened that nut and that nut rather than that one. Anyway, I'll do that later. I'll also push it up the hill with the camera off. Yeah, that backlight's a bit anemic in daylight, but I suppose everything will be. See, full throttle, it's pretty anemic below 10 k's. Once it gets over 10 kilometres an hour, the hub drive motor is turning fast enough to be able to accelerate. Okay, right, and now, very first thing to do, well, I tell a lie, first things to do, 58.4, 30 minutes, 44.9 maximum speed, 13.3 average speed because of all the time stopped opening and closing gates and playing with the light and playing with the mounting for the mirror. Anyway, there's a 58.4. Right. And now, get a battery voltage reading. Straight after it's just done about 6.8 kilometres. Battery's kind of warm, not super warm, but you know, it has noticed its load. .4 volts, down from 41.7. Okay, well, there we go. Now we know. Warbles is having fun. Which is, in fact, as it should be. Now, I think I'm going to recharge that battery on the set of batteries that's got a 20-watt panel on it. It took that panel and 3 days of cloudy weather to recharge those batteries after having recharged battery number 1 after that trip to the railway a couple of days ago. So, Warbles on a lot to YouTube. You're probably not enjoying this as much as I am, and I am having fun. Ciao.